Hi there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is. As always, happy whatever day it is, and welcome. I'm Larry Erickson. This is the Erickson Report. We start this time with an occasional feature that we call Heroes and Villains. The heroes this time are the voters of Nevada. In 2002, a referendum was passed amending the Nevada state constitution to define marriage as between a male and female person. But this year, that amendment was overturned in favor of an amendment recognizing marriage as being between couples regardless of gender. It makes Nevada the first state to put the right to same-sex marriage in its state constitution. It wasn't even close. The vote was 62 to 38. Now, the state already had a domestic partnership law, which was passed in 2009. And of course, the historical Obergefell v. Hodges decision in 2015 struck down bans on same-sex marriage nationwide. But this is actually more than a mere formality for both symbolic and for legal reasons as well. See, between 1998 and 2012, at least 30 states passed amendments putting a ban on same-sex marriage into their state constitutions. Now, Obergefell, obviated all of those restrictions, but they still exist. This way, the people of Nevada are protected, even if Obergefell is ever overturned. And even though the fact is that same-sex marriage is now accepted by something like 70% of the American public, that's according to an October poll by the Public Religion Research Institute. Still, if it was ever overturned, it would mean refighting all those battles state by state, which in turn brings me to the villains. As I mentioned last time, at least two members of the federal Supreme Court, Clarabelle Thomas and Sam Nasham Alito, doubtless eagerly looking forward to the addition of Amy Bugs Bunny Barrett, seen here having just noticed Elmer Fudd, are itching for a chance to take a second shot at making anti-LGBTQ bigotry constitutional by overturning Obergefell. But again, as I said last time, it's doubtful the decision would actually be directly overturned. It's more likely that the rights attendant to same-sex marriage will be stripped away until the right is just a shell of what it was originally. And we are seeing the first signs of that. On November 4th, the U.S. Supreme Court heard oral arguments in the case of Fulton v. City of Philadelphia. Philadelphia actually contracts with various agencies in order to provide foster care services. As part of that contract, it requires those agencies not to discriminate. But now comes Catholic Social Services, affiliated with the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, saying its religious views keep it from certifying same-sex couples as foster parents, while at the same time arguing that they must not be cut out of contracts with the city because of that. In short, they're arguing that they should be able to freely discriminate against same-sex couples while still getting from the city the money that they get for foster care services. Now, Catholic Social Services lost at both the district and appellate levels. But according to court observers, the right-wing majority of the Supreme Court seems likely to agree. That is, that the city of Philadelphia can be required to accept bigotry. Now, it seemed to me that even though this involves a contract rather than a law, the general principle, as I mentioned last time, the general principle that religious beliefs do not exempt you from laws of general applicability should apply here. But apparently that's not true when the religious beliefs of the justices, 7 of the 9 of who are either Catholic or went to Catholic school or both, not when their religious views are involved. Now, the few of the justices got close to but never actually addressed the sort of questions that I was thinking. For example, what if the agency refused to deal with previously divorced people? Catholic doctrine says that marriage is indissoluble. So if you got divorced and remarried, could Catholic Social Services say, oh, your relationship is in violation of our religious standards and therefore we won't deal with you? What if it was an interracial couple? It wasn't until 1967 that U.S. laws striking down bans on that were actually struck down nationwide. But you still find ultra-conservative churches claiming that it's against God's law. Would the city of Philadelphia be required to contract with them if they applied? What if a conservative Jewish organization refused to deal with a couple because one was Jewish and one was not? Would the city have to contract with that? Or is just Christianity, or more specifically Catholicism, getting a pass here? The circumscribing of the rights of same-sex couples, in this case their right to be foster parents, is exactly the sort of concern that Clarabelle and Sam the Sham provoked. I guarantee you this will not be the last time you see this. All right, next up, now for a special election-related edition of our regular feature, 2 Weeks of Stupid, Clowns and Outrages. Clowns, as usual, come first. The thing is, I like to think of the Clown Award, at least some of the Clown Awards, as at least somewhat lighthearted. Things that, even though they may be serious to the people directly involved, still involve such utter stupidity that it still makes you laugh. I haven't really found a lot of that sort of material lately. So this time, I have as clowns people who are utterly nonsensical, but they're not stupid. They know what they're doing it consciously, they're doing it deliberately. So our clowns this week are every single gopper who has blathered and bloviated about how the election isn't over and the media doesn't choose the president, even though relying on media projections has never been a problem for them when they win. 2 examples to stand for the rest. Senator Lindsey Graham has been burbling about a lot of shenanigans supposedly going on during the campaign, needless to say without presenting a shred of evidence. Treaty Pie should not concede, he proclaimed, insisting this is a contested election. The media doesn't decide who becomes president. If they did, you would never have a Republican president forever, so we're discounting them. Now, I would note that neither he nor any other gopper was unwilling to accept media projections of Tweety Pie's win in 2016, nor did he, as far as I can find, express any reservations about the projections of his own win in his Senate campaign this time around. But then there was Ted Ooze, who claimed, we don't know who has prevailed in this election because the results haven't been certified yet, which in fact they never are. It usually takes a couple of weeks, which again did not matter to him in 2016, and it didn't matter to him when Tweety Pie prematurely and completely wrongly claimed election victory election night. Final thought here. Graham Cracker also said, and I'm quoting, if we don't fight back in 2020, we're never again going to win presidentially. Your mouth to God's ear, you clown. Right, for the outrages, on the other hand, we need to be looking to the future and expecting that as dangerous as a second Tweety Pie administration could be, he still has something like 10 weeks to do as much damage as he can. And we should expect him to try to punish the nation, particularly states that voted for Joe Biden. He said it himself. Writing at Raw Story, journalist David K. Johnston notes that in Tweety Pie's book, Think Big, he summed up his life philosophy in a single word: revenge. Then, and I'm quoting Johnston now, then he went on for 16 pages about how what gives him pleasure is ruining the lives of people who do not do as he asks. His long diatribe was intermingled with observations about his desires to do violence, especially against women. And in Tweety Pie's own words, quoting, if you don't get even, you're just a schmuck. So for our outrages, we have 4 examples of Tweety Pie trying to deny the truth that he is a thoroughgoing schmuck and a loser. In chronological order, on October 27th, now this is before the election, but with the ultimate outcome clearly in sight at that point, on October 27th, the EPA relinquished oversight of a number of environmental issues across the lands of 38 federally recognized tribes in the state of Oklahoma. Federal authorities mandated under the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, and the Safe Drinking Water Act, among others, will now be overseen by Oklahoma. The move means that fossil fuels and agriculture corporations will no longer have to consult with tribal governments over matters such as fracking, the dumping of toxic waste, agricultural pollution runoff, or anything else. Those living on tribal lands are now subject to the not-so-tender mercies of the state of Oklahoma, whose fawning devotion to the dirty fuelers and the polluters leaves little doubt about the impact this will have on Native communities, which will become dumping grounds for toxic waste and a long list of other poisons and pollutants. Next case, for nearly 20 years, the roadless rule has been protecting wilderness by prohibiting timber harvesting and road building in designated areas. On October 28th, the Tweety Pie Gang announced an intention to strip the protection of the roadless rule from Alaska's Tongass National Forest. Tongass is our largest national forest, covering 26,000 square miles, or 68,000 square kilometers, in southeast Alaska. It's called the nation's crown jewel by the U.S. Forest Service. It's a pristine temperate zone rainforest. It's an ecosystem providing critical habitat for grizzly bears, wolves, bald eagles, all 5 species of Pacific salmon, and numerous other species. I picked this one picture to show the Tongass, but one picture cannot do its justice, not when its ecosystems include ice fields, glaciers, old-growth forests, and islands facing the Pacific Ocean. As a result of this rule change, done in the face of the fact that 96% of public comment on it opposed it, this rule change means that more than half of the Tongass can now be opened to timbering and mineral exploration. Getting in one more kick to the national grind before the election on November 1st, which was the beginning of the 2021 open enrollment period for the Affordable Care Act, the White House announced a waiver for the state of Georgia, allowing it to scrap the use of healthcare.gov in the state. Over a dozen states have gotten such waivers because they've developed their own state-based exchanges, as healthcare.gov functions for the country as a whole. But they've developed their own state exchanges or some other mechanism that provides coverage at least equal to that mandated under the ACA. Georgia, which also did not expand Medicaid, doesn't have its own online marketplace or any other similar mechanism. So for practical purposes, no one in Georgia will be able to sign up for Obamacare. Instead, people have to go through brokers or do their own personal research on various websites. In other words, any Georgian in need of health insurance now has just been dumped into the individual market. And good luck to them. But don't worry, by the way, don't worry, absolutely no worry at all. According to Seema Verma, who is the director for the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, this waiver will, and I'm quoting, usher in a groundswell of healthcare innovation that will deliver lower costs, better care, and more choice to Georgians, just like the individual market always did in the past. Now that could have made for a good clown. But considering that it's estimated that tens of thousands of people in Georgia will lose health care coverage because of this, and so it can reasonably be said that people will die as a result, it's way too serious for that. Finally, one more from after the election. It came out on November 9th that Tweety Pie has removed the head of the agency that runs the National Climate Assessment, which is the federal government's definitive report on climate change. It's updated every 4 years. The next one's due out in 2022. Well, Michael Kupperberg, a climatologist who has held the post since 2015, was abruptly replaced by David Legates. He was first appointed by Tweety Pie as a Deputy Assistant Secretary at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Has now been put in that place, and he's also someone, you won't be surprised, who has claimed, among other things, that increased levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere are actually good for the planet, and that his opponents in the scientific community are, quoting, a bunch of thugs, unquote. Last month, it was reported that the Trump administration was looking to delay work on the 5th National Climate Assessment. It now looks that delaying it has been upgraded to wrecking it. Remember, 3 of these examples are from before the election, when Tweety Pie was only scared of losing. The tantrums he will throw now that he actually has. By the way, make no mistake, he doesn't believe a single word of the crap he's spouting now. He's just desperately trying to find a way to avoid having to admit that he lost and that his bankruptcy is, his presidency rather, is as bankrupt as most of his businesses. His tantrums now can be expected to be much worse. Revenge. It's what the next week's will be about, and that is an outrage. And we're taking a break. And we are back. All right, next up, it's an occasional feature that we call 5 Things Noted in Passing. 5 things I'm only going to spend no more than a minute or 2 on each, but that I wanted to make sure they got mentioned, okay? So first off, I have a prediction for you. There's some speculation swirling around that Tweety Pie will either resign before the, he'll either pardon himself before he gets kicked out of office, or that he'll resign and let then President Mike Not Worth a Farthing pardon him that way. I don't know if either of those is going to happen, but I do say that it's not necessary for him to do either, because I predict that a Blodden administration, a Blodden Department of Justice, will not prosecute Tweety Pie for any of his crimes, for any of his corruption. Instead, Blodden will grandly say, as the amazing Mr. O did when he came into office facing clear evidence of Bush the Lesser's war crimes, he'll say some version of, "We must look forward, not backward. We must unite as a people, as a nation moving into a better future." And Tweety Pie will walk. Now, in either of those events, Tweety Pie may still not be off the hook, because presidential pardons only apply to federal crimes, not state-level crimes. So other things, such as the tax case going on in New York now, would be unaffected. But prosecuted by the Blodden administration, not a chance. All right, next up. Filed under the heading, "All Your Data is Belonging to Us," Facebook is demanding that a team of New York University researchers stop their work trying to analyze the micro-targeting of political ads on the platform. The researchers have a team of 6,500 volunteers across the U.S. using a browser plugin that enables the researchers to see what ads are targeted to what users, enabling them to study how Facebook ads have been used for disinformation and manipulation. But on October 16th, Facebook demanded that the team disable the plugin and destroy all the data obtained, threatening additional enforcement action if this is not done by November 30th. The claim is that the tool violates the site's rule against automated bulk collection of data. The very exact thing that Facebook itself does all the time in order to have the very demographic data that it uses to its considerable profit enable advertisers to micro-target users. The threatening demand, first reported a week after it was made, has gotten heavy pushback from journalists, academics, and First Amendment lawyers. All right, third up. Another fallout of the COVID pandemic is that the United Nations is facing a financial crisis. As of November 2nd, nearly a third of the 193 member states have not paid up their yearly assessments, leading to a shortfall of $5.1 billion, which in the context of the budget of the United Nations is big enough to threaten to undermine the worldwide operations of the organization. Now, the UN has never actually lived up to its promise, okay, but it's still a valuable organization, especially in its international agencies, such as UNESCO, UNICEF, the Relief and Works Agency, and the World Health Organization, which you did know that was part of the UN, right? By the way, over half the shortfall here is due to the failure of one nation to pay what it owes. Guess who? Speaking, however, of the WHO, it brings me to some news I've been wanting to share since I first heard it. So forgive me for referring back to an announcement that was made on August 25th. That was the day that the WHO declared that polio had been eradicated from the entire continent of Africa. Polio, for those of you too young to remember it, is a highly infectious disease caused by a virus that attacks the central nervous system, leading to paralysis. As recently as the 1980s, polio, also known as infantile paralysis, was a dread disease endemic in 125 nations and claiming 350,000 children a year. Now, it is endemic in precisely 2, Afghanistan and Pakistan, which together have seen a combined total of 102 polio cases in 2020. That is a reduction of over 99.9% from the levels of the 1980s. This was the result of a campaign sparked in 1988 by Rotary International, which gained powerful partners in the form of UNICEF, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, that is the CDC, and the WHO, among others. The campaign was to bring polio vaccines, which had been available in the industrialized world for decades, to those still in need of them. The goal of making polio join smallpox in the dustbin of history has not yet been achieved, but the end is in sight. Finally here, under the heading This Just In, it appears that the Affordable Care Act will survive for the third time a challenge at the Supreme Court. In oral arguments on November 10th on the right-wing's latest attempt to have the law struck down, two of the right-wing judges, John the Smirk Roberts and Brett the Rapist Kavanaugh, appeared ready to agree that the law's mandate to have insurance, the penalty for which Congress eliminated in 2017, should be thrown out, but at the same time appeared to have the rest of the law stand. For his part, Roberts wondered aloud why, if Congress wanted the ACA to be dependent on the mandate and the penalty, it didn't revoke the law when it eliminated the penalties. While Kavanaugh said that precedent pointed to the direction of striking down the mandate but leaving the rest of the law intact. Add the three judges considered liberal, and you have a 5-4 majority. Now, not a sure thing, and clearly the whole issue of health care is something that we're going to be talking about a lot more as the time goes on. But for right now, there is cause to be optimistic that at least we will not lose what we have managed to gain. A decision is expected by late spring. Okay, the election. Right at the top, my response to Joe Biden's victory is not joy or excitement. It is relief. In fact, the very fact that I refer to him as Joe Biden should give you some sense of how excited I am by the prospect of him being president. But the fact is that the threat to our very democracy, our very survival as a democracy, that was presented by the prospect of a second Tweety Pie term was too frightening to countenance. So the fact is, I am tremendously relieved by the outcome. But I also fear that just like what happened in 2008, we will decide that the arrival of a Democrat in the White House means that the work is done, and just like we did then, we will tie our star to the current administration and embrace the idea that their policies mark not only the outer limits of what is politically possible, but the outer limits of what is politically acceptable, what even can be discussed, what even can be on the table. And that is exactly what will happen if we do not push back hard. Forget the presidency for a moment, okay? Just forget that for a moment. After getting the candidates they wanted and running the races they wanted in both the Senate and the House, the Democrats did worse than predicted, worse than they expected. Not only did they not win the Senate, unless they could manage to pull off an improbable double win in the runoffs rather in Georgia on January 5th. They actually lost 5 or 6 seats in the House after thinking they might gain up to a dozen. Okay, so what happened during a conference call of the House Democratic Caucus 2 days after the election? Nancy Pelosi and her top lieutenants and some so-called centrists in the party knew exactly what to do. Blame progressives. It wasn't that they themselves did anything wrong, you understand. It wasn't that the DNC did anything wrong. It couldn't have been that their campaigns were screwed up or poorly run or didn't address the issues that were of concern to their constituents or ignored widely popular proposals in favor of pleasing party bigwigs or big donors. No. It was because some candidates dared breathe the word socialism, and because some other people, not even candidates, but just some other people out there used the phrase defund the police. And these became the basis for Gopper attack ads, which apparently the entire DNC, the entire Democratic Party apparatus was incapable of refuting or responding to. No, they didn't do anything wrong. All that's impossible. No, it was all the progressives' fault. No, not just progressive candidates, but just progressives in general, all of whom apparently should just shut up. Listen up, people. Get it through your heads. The establishment Democratic Party is not on our side. Not on the side of average working people, of the unemployed, of the poor, of the struggling, or the victims of discrimination and unemployment and bigotry, or even on the side of the future of this planet. Now, certainly there are individuals in the party who have been and continue and will continue to fight the good fight. Certainly there are individuals who were or are on our side on particular issues. But as a group, as a whole, the establishment Democratic Party is not. They are on our side insofar and only insofar as it's necessary to protect their power, their positions, and their perquisites. They will ignore us, they will resist us, they will deny us, they will fight us, and then for the sake of their own benefit, they will try to take credit for what we gain through our actions. After his victory in the 2020 Nevada caucuses, Bernie Sanders tweeted that of the Democratic and Republican Party establishments, they can't stop us. In response, longtime Democratic strategist Joe Lockhart tweeted, and I'm quoting here, "The Democratic establishment gave us civil rights, voting rights, the assault weapons ban, Social Security, and Medicare. What have you done, Senator?" All right, just realize, they didn't give us anything. We won it, all of it. Every one of those things that he cited came as the result of years, usually decades, of organizing, marching, protesting, lobbying, petitions, letters, phone calls, court suits, civil disobedience, and yes, voting. We did it, not them. So I turned the question back. Can anyone in the establishment Democratic Party name one gain that has come without significant outside pressure? Can they name one advance that actually originated in the upper echelons of the establishment Democratic Party? They can't, because they didn't give us squat. And they're not going to give us single-payer health insurance, a living wage, or a livable future for ourselves and our children. Remember Nancy Pelosi snidely referring to the Green New Deal as the Green Dream, or whatever they call it. Nobody knows what it is, but they're all for it, right? Remember that? None of it will happen. None of those gains will be made without us constantly pushing, getting what we can, and then coming back again and again for more. They are not on our side. They are not on the side of the underdogs, the victims, the outsiders, the have-nots, the oppressed, the hungry, the landless. And they never will be. They are not on our side. They will continue to not be on our side, to ignore us, dismiss us, to deny us, even when we represent the majority of the public, as we do on a variety of issues, from healthcare to the environment to the economy and back again. It will go on until we make it impossible for them to do it. There is yet much to be gained, to strive for, allies and alliances to be made and lost, and undoubtedly many unhappy compromises to be made along the way. So can they, at least some of them, be useful allies at particular times, at particular causes? Yes, certainly. So they still should be lobbied and petitioned and pressured. But do it knowing that when those causes actually come to the point of affecting the prerogatives of the powerful, you will suddenly find your assistance is no longer required, your counsel no longer desired, your opinions no longer have merit. Can sufficient political pressure move them beyond that point, move them in ways to extents they would prefer to avoid? Absolutely. But do it, again, knowing, going in, they are not on our side. All right, we're going to wrap up here with a very quick RIP. Alex Trebek, host of Jeopardy for over 30 years, died on November 1st. Trebek revealed his condition of stage 4 pancreatic cancer in March 2019, but was determined to keep working as long as he could. During his second round of chemotherapy in October, Trebek joked that one thing they're not going to say at my funeral as part of a eulogy is he was taken from us too soon. Actually, yeah, he was. R.I.P. Alex Trebek. Okay, we are done. That's it. We are out of here. We will see you in 2 weeks. In the meantime, you have the best 2 weeks you possibly can. As always, peace.